Year 7. This is your 6th lesson on the Bible stories, and we're going to be looking at your keywords first. So your first keyword is atonement. Okay, before I show you what it means, have a look at the question. If you've done something wrong, you might have to atone for it. What might that mean? So stop the video now and just have a go before we go over the answer. So atonement. Atonement is the action of making amends for something that you have done wrong. Okay, so did you get that correct? So give yourself a mark if you did. Your second new piece of vocabulary is redemption. So once again, before we have a look at it, let's see if you can have a go at getting this one right. So have a look at the question. If you did something wrong and were told you had to redeem yourself, what would this mean? So again, stop the video and have a go at answering that question before we have a look at what the word means. So, redemption, let's have a look. The act of saving or being saved from sin, error or evil. So it's a bit like correcting something that you might have done wrong. Okay, if you've done something bad, you've got to try and redeem yourself. Now we've got one other keyword, and that is prodigal. Okay, let's have a look at the meaning of this word. Prodigal. Spending money or using resources freely and recklessly, wastefully or extravagant. Okay, now the story that we're going to be looking at today is a prodigal son. You may know this one. Okay, let's have a look. So your knowledge goal, you can write this down on your paper, is to identify the moral message of the prodigal son and analyse or explore its significance today. And your steps to success are, by the end of the lesson, you'll know the story of the prodigal son, the moral message of the story, and how this has influenced society since. Okay, parable. Now this is from your other lesson. What can you remember about what a parable is? So stop the video and see if you can have a think or just jot yourself down a couple of words to remind yourself what a parable is. Okay, a parable, let's see if you've got it right. It's a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. So the example that I gave you the other day in the lesson, I think it was yesterday, was a story about the boy who cried wolf. It's you learn something with it. So this was a boy who kept saying that the wolf was after his sheep, but it wasn't. And then finally the wolf did come along one day and he cried wolf, that the wolf was there, and nobody believed him. So the moral of the story is don't tell lies. Okay, so a parable is a story where it illustrates a moral for you. Okay, now what I want you to do is, in a moment, you're going to watch the video on the prodigal son and make some notes about what you learn about the story. So if you click on the link that you've been given and do that now, please. Now, this story is all about forgiveness. Okay, it's the two children. It's more about the grace of the father, because what the father is doing is reflecting what God is like, and that God will accept any sinner who repents or redeems himself regardless of what he's done. And this is exactly what the father has done in this story. Now, both of the children, you could in some way consider that they are maybe a bit prodigal. The younger son, he obviously went out and spent all of his inheritance that he was given by his father. But regardless of that, the father sort of welcomed him back, and, you know, regardless. But the elder son, in some ways, he he's a bit wasteful with regards to his father's grace. He's not happy with the way he's actually accepted the other brother or his younger son back into the family fold. So in a way, he could be considered a little bit self-righteous, which means, you know, a bit morally superior or self-satisfied. So what I would like you to do is stop the video in a moment and write a summary. If you remember, a summary is picking the key points from what you've watched and writing down the main events of the parable of the prodigal son. So stop the video and do that now, please. Now we're going to read the story, okay? You're going to be adding to your notes. The story is also called The Prodigal Son. Prodigal means to spend a lot of money on things that you don't need and being very wasteful with what you have. You will see that is exactly what this son does. This is the parable that Jesus told. There was once a father who had 2 sons. One day the younger son said to his father, "Father, could you give me my inheritance?" Inheritance is money that the father would give his children after he died. So the father thought about it and decided his sons could have the money now, and he split it evenly between them. Very soon the younger son received the money. He decided that since he had so much money, he would move to a different country and have some fun with it. When he left for good. He took every last thing he had and didn't plan on returning. He wanted to be grown up and spend all his money how he wanted, with no one to tell him what to do. So he just left. He left a big farm with many hired men with everything he needed. He left his family, and more importantly, he left his father, who trusted him enough to give him the money. This probably made his father very sad, and I'm sure he missed him very much. While the son was gone, he spent all the money he had right away. He didn't think to save any of it. He ate out every meal every day. He bought fancy cars, he threw wild parties, and spent money on many other things that God wouldn't be happy with. After he spent all his money, the country he was living in became very poor, and they hardly had enough food for everyone. It was even worse for people who had no money, because food became even more expensive. So it was very hard for poor people to get any food. The son was in trouble. He had no money, no place to live. He had nothing to eat, so he had to get a job. The only job he could find was feeding pigs. He was so hungry, he tried to eat the food that the pigs were eating, but his boss caught him and told him if he ever saw him doing that again, he'd lose his job. That night, as the son was walking home, his stomach wouldn't stop growling. He was so hungry. He saw some people walking towards him, and he asked them if they could give him some money for food, but no one would give him anything. Everyone was so poor, it was hard to share with anyone. The son went to bed hungry, and when he woke up, he realised something. When he lived with his father, even the hired men had more food than they needed, and now he was starving to death. At that moment, he made a plan. He would go back to his father's house and say to him, "I've sinned against God and against you. I don't deserve to be called your son, so hire me and I will work for you." He knew that if he became like a hired man on his father's farm, he would still be better off than he was right now, so he'd always have a warm place to stay and food to eat. So he headed for home. It took the son a long time to get home. He was just hoping that his dad would let him work on the farm and let him be a hired man. The son was walking up to the farm while he was still a long way off, and he could see someone notice him and start to run towards him. He was sure that they must have been expecting someone else. No one would be excited to see him. As the person got closer, he realised it was his father, and he was yelling, my son, you're finally home." He couldn't believe it. His father threw his arms around him and kissed him. But the son quickly said, "Father, I've sinned against God and against you. I don't deserve to be called your son." The son wanted to continue, but the father said to one of his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the biggest calf and kill it. Let's have a party and celebrate because my son was lost and is found." A little while later, the older son, who was working in the field and heard the music and dancing, so he called to one of the servants and asked what was going on. "Your brother's come home and your father's having a party for his return." This upset the older brother and he refused to join the party. The father heard that he was upset, so he went to talk to him and invited him to join the party. But the son refused, saying, "Look, I've been working for you all these years and I've never disobeyed you. Yet you never had a big party for me to celebrate with my friends. But now my younger brother has come home, spent all the money you gave him, and you killed the biggest calf for him." "But my son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. We have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was lost, and now he's found." Okay, so as I said, the elder child, although he has stayed with his father, the father has said that everything else that is on the farm would be his when he dies, and it's a bit like a bit of jealousy, really. He feels like he's probably a little bit more superior than his younger brother because he didn't go off and spend all the money that he had. He's not happy. He's just thinking about gaining stuff rather than the love and graciousness that the father has between his two children. You know, what this parable actually does is reflects the love and the boundless mercy of God, okay, and parents usually, because we're very forgiving people because we love our children regardless. Okay, so what I want you to do now is you're going to stop the video in a moment and write an explanation of this story in your book. But what I would like you to do, thinking about the two key words, atonement and redemption, I'd like you to try to use those two pieces of vocabulary in your explanation, please. So you can flick back and have a look back at what the words mean. Okay, so stop the video and do that now, please. Then what I want you to do is think about this question. Do you think the moral message of redemption is still relevant today? Now, to answer this, you're going to analyse the question on your piece of paper, or if you've got a book or whatever you're writing on. So just as a reminder, analyse means to examine something in detail, typically in order to explain and interpret it. So it's up to you whether or not you feel that message, that moral message of redemption, is relevant. You might think it is, you might think it isn't. So below, I've given you some sentence starters. You can use these if you choose, but it doesn't matter. You can use sentence starters of your own. So the message of redemption either is, if you think it is relevant, or isn't, so you decide which, is or isn't still relevant today because. And what I would like you to do is come up with an example of why it is still or isn't still relevant to today. And then come up with another reason why you consider that this message may or may not be relevant. So if you stop the video now, please, and do that on your paper or in your book. Okay, your final feedback. The two key words, you've got atonement. So what message does the prodigal son send out about atonement? You can answer that in your book or on your paper, please. And your other key word, redemption. Can you think of any other stories that explore issues of redemption? So once again, if you can answer that in your book. And that's it for today. Thank you.